Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. So we're here today with Lynn Martin, who's the CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, and it's been an exciting time at the New York Stock Exchange of late, Lynn. You've had a couple of hot IPOs, a lot of press, a lot of enthusiasm to see the thawing of the otherwise chilly IPO market. However, I know you had Reddit, and then you had another company go just recently too, right?
Yep, and a household name called UL Solutions. And I say that affectionately because I challenge you to walk around your house and see how many times the letters UL are on every device you have.
That stands for Underwriters Laboratory?
That's right. That's right.
Yep. So that's interesting because that's not in the same category as a Reddit. So it shows that it's not just the hot tech content companies. It's a broader cut, which is good for the markets. Lynn, you've become an expert now on the markets and the economy, in addition to your computer skills and technology skills, data analytics skills that you've acquired through education and experience. Bob Diamond, who used to run Barclays, and Larry Cantor used to be the head economist there at Barclays, and before that, J.P. Morgan. They've both been saying since the beginning of the year, no Fed rate cuts, at least through June, and now they've extended and said this year. In fact, Larry went as far to say that with the data that's coming in, he thought it would be irresponsible for the Fed to cut rates now. What's your view on the economy? The net outcome of what they were suggesting was we're in pretty much of a Larry David economy. It's pretty good. What's your thoughts?
I mean, I think the strength of the consumer has definitely been what has gotten us through the last couple of years of choppiness in markets, so to speak. The consumer is still out spending. They've varied what they're spending on. It's not always been on goods. It's been services. Think about every time you go to an airport and every flight you take, it's hardly an empty seat on planes.
I haven't seen an empty seat in a while.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But I think what the Fed is doing is very responsible in that they're looking at the data. They're looking to see what the data is guiding them to do in the future. So they didn't preemptively cut rates because for a while it looked like inflation was headed in a different direction, right? It looked like inflation was going to be headed towards that 2% goal that they have. Obviously, the last couple of prints have been not what the Fed has expected. And I think just recently you saw Chair Powell start to tame the expectations of the market. So he has moved away, it looks like, from his 3 rate cut signaling that he was doing throughout the course of the year to date. And now he's saying, well, maybe there won't be 3, maybe there'll be 1, maybe there'll be none, maybe, some people in the market are questioning, should there be a rate hike? I don't know what the right answer is, but I am happy to see that our regulators and policymakers continue to act responsibly using the data that they have at hand.
Well, it's sort of why Oz is the default currency for the rest of the world, because we have institutions like the Fed, which are ostensibly unpolitical and drawing on the data itself and have one goal in mind, which is the best of the economy. And I think that's why we're the envy of all the other economies in the world, is because our forefathers had the good intention to create something like the Fed and keep them independent.
Speaking of independence, I feel like that's one of our big responsibilities, and one of my responsibilities, and something that we take very seriously at the New York Stock Exchange, to remind people around the globe that our markets are the envy of the world. They've been deliberately curated for more than 232 years at this point. and have weathered multiple pandemics, multiple shocks, multiple crises, and
Wars.
always come out stronger.
Yep.
So it is something that we take great pride in, being the institution that we are.
That must be a heavy burden on the shoulders of anyone in your chair, and to realize that you do have that long 100+ year history, and that the institution has to keep up with the changing economics, with the changing technologies. So you're a technologist, Lynn.
Yep.
You're the better part of your career has been in technology. You had the good sense to be taught by Christian brothers at a place called Manhattan College. Being a Jasper, I'm an honorary Jasper because I got an honorary doctorate there a couple of years ago for being the commencement speaker at graduation, which was great fun. And you serve on the board there at Manhattan College now, don't you?
Yep, I do. I'm a very proud member of the board of trustees there.
And you have an interesting guy, a friend of mine, who's the chair of the board, and
Absolutely.
also the chair of the board at a little company called American Express, where he's also the CEO.
Absolutely.
Steve Squeary. He's a good man.
Great guy.
Manhattan College has really come a long way in the last decade or so. And I know Steve's been very generous to the school. And I have so many good friends who were, like so many of the students at Manhattan College, the first in their family to go to college. Mm-hmm. Is that still the case at Manhattan College?
Yeah, it's almost the mission of the college to continue to foster the next generation of leaders, people who come from immigrants, first generation students. Mm-hmm. Really what makes America great, the building blocks of our great country is how we continue to embrace people, but then also educate them to achieve higher positions.
Were there many women when you were there?
So there were many women, but not many women in my major. Probably unsurprising. And my major was computer science. Yes, I was computer science. I think if you looked at the demographics of that major today, you'd probably not see much change. It's still
really
heavily a male-dominated discipline.
Interesting. But you had the good sense to get an Ivy League master's.
I did, from Columbia University, another New York City school.
And what did you get your master's in?
Statistics.
So you like math?
I do. I was double majoring in math for a period of time when I was in undergrad, focusing on computer science and math. And then I decided to branch out into business a little bit because I became really interested in the models that were underpinning the markets more than anything. So I decided to get a minor in finance along the way, which caused me to have to drop the double major in math. But I always loved the elegance of mathematics and the quantitative ability to prove a point. So I couldn't abandon that desire, and that's what led me to get the master's degree in math.
Tell me, did you go right to IBM?
I did. Like any good comp sci undergrad, I decided that I had a variety of opportunities, but the path that appealed to me the most when I was graduating university was to work for a tech company. And I really wanted to stay in New York, and IBM was a great opportunity offered to me.
So tell me, what kinds of things did you do in your career at IBM?
I am going to date myself. I was coding mainframes when I first started at IBM. I am totally going to date myself. So I started out, I worked on some code for a company called Pershing, who was an IBM client, now is Bank of New York. And then I progressed, wound up as project manager at IBM on, again, dating myself, a Y2K project for Chase Manhattan Bank at the time. Now, obviously, JP Morgan Chase.
And how long were you at IBM?
I was there for 3 years. I was fortunate enough to be able to achieve my master's degree while at IBM. After I had achieved my master's degree from Columbia, it was a really interesting time in the market. You had just gotten past Y2K, which thankfully was a non-event for the infrastructure of the world. Although I do remember spending New Year's Eve in a call center. Pretty iconic New Year's Eve as a woman in her 20s. And what did I do? I spent it in a call center, ensuring that
with your fingers crossed.
Exactly. Although I think we knew when we woke up that morning that nothing had failed in Australia, nothing had failed in Japan, nothing had failed as the midnight was reached in various parts of the world. We felt pretty good going into the 11 o'clock hours. Yeah. So,
so then around 1 o'clock, you pop the champagne cork.
Something like that. And then around that time, though, you also had, right after Y2K, you had the dot-com era of markets. And because of the advent of the internet and the electronification of systems and the dot-com era and harnessing the power of the internet to do a variety of things, you started to see markets go electronic. So that was when I found my next opportunity to join the London Financial Futures Exchange as a business development professional, which sounds a bit curious considering I was a technologist. The reason why they were looking for business development professionals is they had just moved their markets fully electronic. And instead of interacting with traders, they needed someone to interact with coders, people writing to this thing called an API, which would allow investment firms to interact with a fully electronic market. So that was the gap that I filled, for lack of a better description. I understood how to talk to a programmer as someone who was a programmer.
Yep. And along the way, you had time after your education, while you were doing two things at once. You did three things at once, and you created a family too.
I did. So for a while, I was, a business development professional, working with programmers, working with as the face of the trader, became more and more coder-based, electronic-based, working with, more of the front office. And then I, along the way, met my husband, got married, and started a family.
And today, a couple of boys in that household?
That's right. Yep. My husband and I are proud parents of two sons.
That's great. Now, not only were you a pioneer back at Manhattan College when you were one of very few women in the computer science program, but you've been a trailblazer, a groundbreaker all along the way, as you just mentioned in a couple of your career stops, doing things that no one else was doing, and then certainly some things that there were very few females doing. Well, and you've been able to balance all of this. I marvel, frankly, at you and a few others I know like you who've been able to do everything, get a great education, be active in their careers, be groundbreakers in their careers, all of that, and balance the challenges of family all at the same time. Do you think of it as accomplishing something, or is it just, that's what we do?
I think that's very kind of you to say. I think of it as life, though. Yep. There are various parts of your life, as you know better than anyone, having yourself built such a iconic business, successful business, but then also recognizing the importance of family as well. There's a balance to life. And I think it's important that you appreciate the multifaceted portions of life.
Tell me, you weren't the first woman
No.
A CEO of the New York Stock Exchange, but you have a lady who preceded you just immediately before you. Is that a non-issue anymore?
I'd say the biggest compliment that I've received since I've taken this position is that many times the question of my gender doesn't come up, or the topic of my gender doesn't come up. It's just, what we were talking about before, what's going on in markets, what's the Fed going to do? And that, I think, is the biggest
a good sign, right?
Yeah, I think it's the biggest sign that the world has moved past okay, you're the first to do this, or you're the first to do that. And it's, more normal now that it could be a woman, could be a man in a position of power, in a position of leadership.
On the leadership front, I wonder how you think about, Lynn. I know in my years of being in business, visiting the floor of the New York Stock Exchange, it's changed so dramatically. And of course, the real change came about when Jeff and ICE decided to buy the New York Stock Exchange. They were, Jeff Recker, the CEO of ICE, they were pioneers in bringing a digital mindset to everything they did. And that's what they built their success on. Comfortable with technology, comfortable with really dramatic change in industries, and they use that comfort, that capability, that drive to change so many industries that they've touched through their acquisitions and the digitization of those businesses. How are you and the ICE team now thinking about the new technologies that we all can't help hear about every day and talk about every day? I have lots of friends in the community that you and I both live in. I remember when I first moved into that community. Here I am, a florist, a small businessman, and I meet all these people. What do you do? I'm on the Florida Exchange. What do you do? I'm a bond salesman. I'm a bond broker. I'm a bond analyst. I had no idea what any of them did, but they're not around anymore. All those jobs have changed. Technology has influenced those jobs, and now you can bowl on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. It isn't that bedlam that it used to be, say, 25 years ago. How are you and your partners at ICE think about what the next digital change will be on your world, on your companies and the markets you maintain?
Well, I think you put it really well as how we think about this opportunity, Jim, in that technology has a transformative power. It has the power to add transparency. And that's what we've always focused on. It's been a deliberate playbook that has been run at ICE to apply good technology to add transparency to opaque markets. So going back in the history of ICE, which started adding transparency to power markets, to energy markets, to markets
that was the first place.
Absolutely, that were opaque and not able to be accessed by the ecosystem that needed to access them. There were intermediaries that stood in between the institutional users
who benefited from that lack of visibility.
Absolutely. So then the next playbook, if you will, was run with the commodity markets when ICE acquired the New York Board of Trade. So coffee, cocoa, sugar, again, moving that market to be electronic. And importantly, as a result of applying cutting edge technology, enabling that market to remain open for the bulk of the day. I think we only close that market now for an hour a day just to recycle the system, if that much. But that, I think, again, speaks to the way the markets have continued to evolve from a risk management standpoint. Can you imagine only being able to hedge your coffee, cocoa, sugar position for 4 hours a day? No, you can't imagine that. But
it seems silly now, doesn't it?
It does seem silly now. But think about how frustrated you would be if you were a producer of coffee, a producer of cocoa, or a producer of a refiner of sugar. Think about how frustrating that must have been for those people, that they could only hedge their exposure during those 4 hours. Technology enabled us to keep that market open so that anyone in the ecosystem could hedge that position 23 hours a day. Same thing with the energy markets. Now you move to the New York Stock Exchange. Given how interconnected markets are, you have to have good technology in order to stitch together the interconnectedness of the global equity markets as well as the U.S. individual market centers. Regulation NMS, which was introduced in 2006, added a tremendous amount of complexity by requiring, and benefits, by requiring there to be a best bid or offer offered to the market at any given point, irrespective of what exchange it was traded
Yep.
on. There are now 17 equity markets. How do you stitch that all together unless you have good technology and enable the cost to not necessarily the institutional, not just to the institutional users, but to me and you, my parents, anyone who's managing their own retirement portfolio, making sure that that benefit of efficiency, of transparency gets passed along to the real end users, the mom and pops in the market. So as we have moved through markets at ICE, we have applied a very deliberate playbook of adding good technology to allow the human being to do more. The floor of the New York Stock Exchange still has a vibrant community, but they are interacting with nearly three-quarters of a trillion messages every day that come into our systems.
No
Buys, sells, and trades. A human being can't consume that much information. I wouldn't be able to scale that with human beings. You can only scale that with good technology. But because there's the human intelligence over it, that human can make sense of what's a good quote, a bad quote, what to do with that information coming into an order book. So we like to say the most tech-forward organizations are ones that have that state-of-the-art technology that can adapt to the data coming into them, but then importantly, apply that human intelligence, that uniquely human intelligence to make sense of the data that is coming into the system.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
You and your team members at the New York Stock Exchange have to run a fail-proof system every day.
Absolutely.
But how do you then make sure you're not locked out of the changes in technology? How do you separate the functions within your shop to say, okay, you guys go over here and do what you can to play with those new technologies so that we understand how it can make us better, safer, more robust. But we won't bring that into our system until it's absolutely proven that it'll be to our standards that our customers demand. How do you have that yin yang kind of mentality in the one shop?
You are absolutely right. And I think that's one of our unique hallmarks in that a new technology comes out in the marketplace. We're not going to be the first to adopt it. We're going to have a very
But you want to know about it.
Correct. Mm-hmm. And we're going to have a sandbox off to the side that doesn't necessarily definitely does not touch production systems.
Yep.
That we can learn about it. We can get more familiar with it. But we're not going to implement that into production until we know that it is ready for prime time, ready from a cyber perspective, ready from a resilience perspective, ready from a reliability perspective.
And how does ICE, your parent company, how do they think about the question that comes up in your world regularly, I would think, about buy versus build?
Oh,
you could have built your own exchange and attacked the New York Stock Exchange. But at some point you decided the brand value, that 100-plus year history had value to it. The relationships they had value. And it was a better decision to buy versus build. You'd already built some capabilities in other areas, so you knew the impact you could have on these opaque systems. And give me some insight into that decision-making process. Because you've done both.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do both regularly. We tend to do a very stringent financial analysis. If we're going to acquire a business, what is going to be the payback to our shareholders over 3 years, 5 years, whatever the time horizon we think it's going to have the optimal payback. Sometimes that's going to be to acquire a business, particularly when it's got a unique network, a unique value associated with it, such as the New York Stock Exchange. Otherwise, we're going to go build it, because when you think about the integration effort, the technical debt that may come along with a legacy business, it's not insignificant. A great example is the NYSE acquisition that was announced December 2012. We closed on it November 2013. Just last year, we completed the upgrade of all of our matching engines.
Wow.
But going back to what you said earlier, it was a very careful, how do you architect the optimal system with the state-of-the-art technologies and implement it in a way that is not disruptive to the market, as only accretive to the market? Obviously, we didn't start working on this the day we closed the New York Stock Exchange. It was an idea more than anything. But, it did take around 5 years to roll it out. And now we've got the most performant, most deterministic matching engine in the market. If there is a new business area, though, which at ICE we have continuously revamped our business or taken our business in interesting directions, we're always looking at opportunities.
Your targets are big, juicy, non-transparent systems with lots of complexity to it, because you have a hammer nail kind of syndrome where you look for those big, complex marketplaces and say, if we bring our tech magic to it, we can reduce the cost, we can make it more reliable, we can make it more accessible, and we can make a profit where others couldn't. So we will attack the systems that are entrenched by keeping things hidden, and we're going to bring daylight to the equation.
Exactly. Said differently, we're really good at doing the hard work, the hard nuts and bolts tech implementation work to digitize ecosystems that are notoriously paper-based, analog, not transparent. And our latest generation of that.
But they have to be big markets, right?
Not necessarily. It's not always a big acquisition. We do a lot of small bolt-on acquisitions. And if I think about the way we got into the mortgage market, we actually started with a database system called MERS, Mortgage Electronic Registry, which is the home for 85% of home loans in the market. It's, for lack of a better description, it applies a mortgage identifier, which is analogous in the bond world to a QSIP, a unique identifier for every loan in the market. And that's really where we started our mortgage journey. It was a small acquisition, involved, importantly, a replacement of the technology. And then as we got to know that ecosystem better, we did the larger acquisitions. So first was a company called Ellie Mae in August 2020. And then most recently, last year, we completed the acquisition of Black Knight. And Jeff has seen the opportunity to really think about the mortgage ecosystem from the time a mortgage is generated, your rate is locked from that point, all through the monthly payments that we all make on our mortgages.
The marketplace idea is so interesting to me. I met a young man yesterday who's a neighbor of ours who created a market for judgments, legal judgments. So he created a marketplace where you could buy and sell judgments. So if you go to court and sue somebody for a claim, you can then register that claim and trade it. So this young man said he had a claim against FTX, and he sold it on his own exchange.
Oh, wow.
For I don't know how many cents on the dollar. But I just thought that was so clever to develop a digital marketplace so that people could trade their judgments. And people could assess how hard it would be to collect, whether or not they collect, what it's worth, and It just, you people who have that ability to look at things and say, I know it's really complicated, but I can make it simple.
Mm.
And it's
And
hard to do.
transparent. And transparent.
Yes.
And that's the whole thing with anything that is electronically generated. There's a tremendous amount of data that comes out of that. That just adds transparency. Transparency is a good thing. Transparency is what drives efficiency. And data drives that transparency.
Lynn, personally, how do you keep up with the changes in technology? You're a technologist, you're a business leader, you're a thought leader. How do you try and keep up with the world of technology? You have a day job of running things.
Yeah.
You have responsibilities within the New York Stock Exchange, beyond. How do you stay current? Are there certain places you go to that are your reliable voices on AI, your reliable voices on market changes? How do you stay current on all the things that you have to?
Yeah. And to be honest, it's something that is rapidly evolving, because you think about the pace of change in technology, it's never been faster. If you look at AI, for example, AI, if we were doing this podcast 2 years ago, I don't know that we would be talking about AI. But now it's the two letters that everyone talks about when they're having conversations such as this. You talk about during your business day, you talk about at the country club, for example. Like, everyone wants to talk about those two letters at the moment. I have a couple of approaches. I read a lot, obviously. I tend to talk to people, though. That's really how I stay the most current. Talk to folks.
You have a good network of people that have specific expertise that you tap into all the time?
Absolutely. But then also, I also like to fiddle around with stuff in my own personal life. So I spend some time thinking about how would this make my personal life better, or how may the next generation be using it? Obviously, my kids are great for that, even though they're quite young. The way
they're growing up digitally, not me.
Are.
I sure didn't. And how do you think they'll think about things differently? AI will be something that they don't even think as a separate thing.
No.
It's just how things happen.
It's just how they do their life, how everything happens in their life.
Will we see a lot more of the interface with our technology being voice activated?
I think so. I see the way my oldest son, for example, generates text messages to his friends or to me. He just speaks into the phone. So that's just interesting to me as a way.
He thinks voice first, and probably gets annoyed when he can't voice interact.
Correct.
So here at Flowers, we're patting ourselves on the back after Valentine's Day that we were able to handle any customer inquiries digitally, and we had our chat function really working. And I said, guys, by the next set of holidays, this will sound like rocking chairs. Because people are just going to expect they expect to be able to interact via voice. They don't want to sit and type. They want to be able to, walking down the street, interact. Say, I just want to check on my order, blah blah blah, and they want to do that voice. They don't want to stop and type. And so I turned those smiles into frowns, because we were all pretty proud of ourselves. And I said, let's keep track of the fact that this is changing so fast that the next set of holidays will already be very different. So let's not rest on our laurels.
I think that's very forward thinking. Though I don't know that everyone is thinking in that same way in business, because some businesses are still trying to figure out, okay, what could AI do for my business? I think the chatbot functionality is now where most people are landing. We use AI, LLMs in particular, in a variety.
LLMs being large language models, so the things that we know as ChatGPT. Yep.
Correct.
And I think the fact that consumers had access to a ChatGPT since November a year ago, now coming up a year and a half, I think that created the buzz. So even at the country club, even at the local shopping center, that got us all talking about it, because we're just amazed. I'll give you, for instance, we were doing some work at the Worth offices on a climate conference we had coming up a few months out. Mm-hmm. And I asked one of the editorial people there if she would do some research on who are the leading voices on this area of climate research, and who among them are comfortable appearing on stage and are published effectively. Now, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, That was a month-long project, a lot of research.
Mm-hmm.
An hour later, she came over to me and said, here's the top 20 in this area of climate research. Here's who's comfortable speaking. Here's awards they've got. And I said, well, how long have you been working on this? She goes, well, since you mentioned it right before lunch. And I was just amazed at what she was able to find and assemble and organize through a chat GPT interface. That's my little moment of, oh, this is really different.
Yeah, it's very different. I don't think I've seen technology be adopted so quickly.
A lot of people say, well, blockchain was overhyped, and I don't think so. I think blockchain is just a very different kind of impact on us, but it's happening around us all the time. And you must be giddy about how blockchain has impacted your business. But in terms of overall impact, I think this is much bigger and certainly for real. Am I correct?
I think so too. I think any technology, it comes down to use cases. If you have use cases where you can implement a technology, then the technology is going to be adopted quickly. So the fact that there have been a variety of use cases that businesses have coalesced around in terms of integration for large language models, natural language processing, generative AI, whatever the case may be, I think that's why you're seeing it be adopted so quickly. As opposed to a blockchain where there were a lot of excitement, some good functionality within that technology, but the use cases where it was initially tried, the efficiency wasn't yet found. So if there is an efficiency gain, then you see everyone run towards that.
To wrap it up, we represent lots of small businesses. Our partners are florists around the world, are bakers around the world, gourmet shops around the world, fruit stores, garden centers. So we have networks and networks and networks of local craftsmen and providers. When they hear you speak about how the world is evolving and changing, what should they be doing? Their question to us is always, what do we do? How do we anticipate this is going to impact us? And then they always ask, and what should I be telling my kids to study in school?
Your kids are going to study whatever they want to study in school, as I've learned.
If they want to be cultural anthropologists, hug them.
There you go. Exactly. My own kids, I'd love for them to have had the coding bug having bit them. Neither of them appear to be all that interested in coding yet. So,
wow.
But that's okay. I think it's most important to rely on your trusted partners, the folks that do business with you, Jim. Let's rely on people such as yourselves who are helping them get their product out, helping them build their businesses, helping them build the network. It's really the network effect that you're bringing to their businesses.
Very much so.
And the way you're helping them move their business from today to where it will be in the next 5 years.
And frankly, we're doing the same thing. We're saying, look, we have a dozen companies that we know of out there who have been spending billions, not just this year, but for many years, to stay on the bleeding edge, cutting edge of these new technologies. So we have to do the same thing. We have to pick our partners, invest with them, work alongside them, offer to be a test case for them so that we can have confidence in them, ride their coattails, because this is just too big, too expensive for us to be cutting our own path here. We have to rely on partners, and I guess that's a suggestion you have for our retail partners too, to do the same.
Absolutely.
Well, you give good advice, and we heed it. And I'm so glad to get to know a little bit more about your career today, get some insights into what's going on at the New York Stock Exchange, more broadly at ICE, and how you see the world. It's an amazing success story, and it's an amazing change and adoption story of new technologies, new thoughtful kinds of leadership like you bring to the table, Lynn. And thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom with us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Jim. It's good to see you.
Thank you, Lynn. Bye.
Bye.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. 1-800-Flowers. Share with love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.